Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm a former Boeing 737 pilot and a member of the PMDG 737 tech team. Welcome to our tutorial on the pre-flight procedure in the Boeing 737 in Flight Simulator 2024. Today we'll do the pre-flight procedure except for the FMC setup, which has already been covered in the previous tutorial. So the sequence in Boeing aircraft is contrary to Airbus. You do FMC first and cockpit second. In Airbus aircraft it would be the other way around, so it may be a little bit counterintuitive for you at first if you are used to different aircraft. Now, the pre-flight procedure follows the panel scan, and the panel scan is quite easy. You can see the panel is divided in different parts. It goes number one down here. Then you go back up and you go down here, down here, down here, down here, then across the light panel like that, across the MCP, the main panel, and so on. So we are going to pretty much follow that exact sequence. So starting up here, we make sure that all the switches on the flight control panel are guarded and the yaw damper is turned on. Next up, we move to the navigation, transfer and display switches, where we check that they are all in the normal position. The control panel is in normal and the source selector is on auto. But let me show you a quick trick on the control panel switch down there. So right now, we are using the option to synchronize the captain's and the first officer's EFIS control panels. But if you do not want to use this option, and you want to make an easy change, for example, let's say the QNH is 1016 now, and we want to change that and easily transfer it to the other side, then you could use the control panel switch, flick that to both on one, and now it's copying everything you got over here to the other side. From there, return it back to the normal position, and you can see that it remembers things like the QNH or the minimum or the EFIS control panel selections like terrain, airports, traffic, and so on. So that's a nice little trick of what you can do with the control panel switch up there, copying and pasting data. The source select switch is on auto. Moving down then to the fuel panel, the engine valve and the spar valve lights are illuminated dim, which indicates that the valves are closed. So the engine valve is the fuel valve located right at the engine. The spar valve is the one located in the spar that connects the wing with the engine. Then we move down, ensure the fuel filter bypass lights are not illuminated. We've got the cross feed, which we open. Observe the light go bright, then dim, which indicates that the valve is open. And then we close it again, observing the light go bright and then off, which indicates that the panel has, or that the valve has closed. However, after checking this, you need to do another light test because the circuit breaker of the light is the same circuit breaker that controls the valve. So if the valve is operating during the closing procedure and it goes bright then off, it might go off because the light may have failed or the circuit breaker may have popped rather than the valve closing correctly. So you always have to do that. Now, from there, in the real world, by the way, you can just test the light by pressing the button in, which tests the lights as well, which is a sufficient test. Unfortunately, PMDG has not implemented that at this time. From there, we move on ahead and turn on the fuel pumps. So we turn on the main tank pumps, and if there is more than, by the book, 453 kilograms of fuel in the center tank, for those of you using Freedom units, that equals 1,000 pounds, by the way. So if you have more than 453 kilos of fuel in the center tank, you're also going to turn on the main tank pump switches. Do note that I would personally delay this a little bit to 1,000 kilograms or roughly 2,000 pounds of fuel, because if the fuel is 453 kilos in the pre-flight procedure, there is going to be fuel used during taxi, there is going to be fuel used by the APU, and if you're going over some bumps on the runway, it may cause a temporary fuel shortage to the main tank pumps, even if there is like exactly 453 kilos in there, which could cause a low pressure light to illuminate, giving you master caution fuel, on your takeoff run, which would be a reason to reject the takeoff below 80 knots. So, by the book, 453 kilos or 1,000 pounds. In real life, more like 1,000 kilos or 2,000 pounds. From there, we are going to move up to the electrical panel. So over here, we do not really have to worry about many things, but something that is always worth checking is the position of these selectors. So normally I would leave the AC meter on the ground power indicator so that it actually shows me what the ground power is delivering. Moving down, the battery is guarded, the cabin utility and IFE switches are in the on position, standby power is guarded, the IDG disconnects are guarded. On the electrical panel, the bus transfer switch is guarded, the wiper selector is set to park, and the APU maintenance light is not illuminated. Going down then to the center of the overhead panel, circuit breaker switch as needed. If you're in a full flight simulator and want to annoy your instructor, then you're going to turn this up because that light is going to shine directly in his eyes. The equipment cooling switches are both in the normal position, which is the aft position, which may be a bit counterintuitive. So normal position is the aft position. Emergency exit lights aren't. The fasten seatbelt sign can be switched on as soon as refueling is completed, and only when refueling is completed. If you are still refueling, or if you have not received fuel in first place, you are going to leave the fasten seatbelt switch in the off position. The chime is switched off, and the right wiper is in the park position. Moving on to the fourth column then, we are going to turn on the window heat, ensure that the probe heat is off or auto, depending on what is installed on your aircraft. The anti-ice is switched off, and the hydraulic pumps are all on. You do not need to do a CBR test. And then on the air conditioning and pressurization gauges, we check that the differential pressure is 0, which, well, since the cabin pressure is the same as the outside pressure, it has to be. The cabin altitude needle is going to show you the airfield elevation, so the small needle, in case you were, for example, in Denver, would be somewhere around 5,000 feet, which is the field elevation in Denver. The cabin vertical speed indicator needs to show 0 at this point. Moving on to the rightmost column, the voice recorder is on. We are going to check the cabin temperatures here, and if this becomes too hot or too cold, anything between around 25 to 30 is normally good. Once the needle reaches 30, that's a bit too hot. Generally, your 737 does not have a very accurate temperature indication, and passengers in aircraft always want it warmer than they would, for example, in a restaurant. So while on the ground, we always say 21 degrees is optimal. In an airplane, you need something about 25, 24. And if you've got cabin crew from warm countries, they generally want it around 28 or so. Otherwise, they are going to complain. So the trim area is going to be on. The zone control switches are set in a specific way. And generally, you want the cont cabin, which is the flight deck, on around A. You want the forward cabin at around the U position, and the aft cabin at about the T position. And that setting is going to normally give you good temperature control in the airplane. Do note that if it's cold outside and you're just about to turn the air conditioning system on, you generally want to move those switches somewhere to the 10 o'clock position over here, because the 737 just does not control the temperature very well. Believe me, it's going to pump 60 degrees towards the passengers through the ducts. That is not going to be comfortable. So those switches are really something you're playing with all the time in the real aircraft. Moving further down, then we got the ram door full open lights. The recirculation fans are both in the auto position. The packs should be switched to auto, but only if there is no air conditioning unit connected. If the air conditioning unit is connected, keep the packs off, otherwise the packs may get damaged. The isolation valve is open, the engine bleeds are on, APU bleed is off, and none of those lights over here should be illuminated at this point. On the cabin pressure controller, we are going to set our cruising altitude, and if you had planned a step climb during your flight, then you would actually set the first planned cruising altitude. The controller is set to automatic, and the landing altitude is going to be set to the destination field elevation. Now you can either get this from the charts, from your flight plan, if that one has a field for it. For example, over here, the Ryanair layout does have a field down here, destination elevation Palma 27 feet, or you can cheat by getting that from the FMC. So if you do that, by the way, let's quickly synchronize the data again. So if you want to get your destination field elevation from the FMC, you can go to the legs page, scroll forward until you got the runway waypoint of your destination airport, and you can see that one normally reads 50 feet above your actual threshold elevation. So that's because the FMC wants to cross the runway threshold 50 feet above it and not smash right into the threshold. So therefore take this figure, subtract 50 feet, and then you got your field elevation. And if you're wondering why there is a difference between this and this, that's because this one is based on the actual aiming, or on the actual airport reference point, while this is based on the runway threshold. So that's where the difference comes from. So 58 feet minus 50 means we can use 0 down here. Going over the lights, we generally want to have the wheel well lights on the ground, wing lights off, anti-collision off, position in the forward strobe position, correction, steady position, not strobe, logo light on if it is dark, engine start switches off, and the igniter is going to be set to the right hand side for the first flight of the day, or when operating through a staffed maintenance base. So for example, this is number 1, the first flight of the day, and number 2, we do have engineering here in Cologne, so therefore we are going to use the right igniter. The reason we do this is because the right ignition runs through the electrical standby system, and this is basically the only way to find out if there is a malfunction in that system. So for this reason we are using the right igniter, while the left igniter uses, I think, AC bus number 1, I might be mistaken about that one. In any case, it uses any of the buses that would give you a warning in case that is not actually working. APU switch as needed, we normally keep it off, and all the lights on the ground are turned off. So taxi light off, runway and turn-off lights off, and landing lights off as well. If your aircraft was fitted with the old landing lights, we would also turn those off. From here we are moving down and going to the glare shield. Theoretically speaking, we have already set up the EFIS control panel, but just go over it again, ensure that it is set as required for your departure, also including the VOR or ADF selections down there. Then we move on to the MCP. The first thing to do there is to turn on the flight directors, and we always turn the flight director on the side of the pilot flying on first. The reason we do this is because it sets that side to the master, which means that it is going to use the nav data from that side. So flight director on, master light comes on, we are flying from the captain's seat today, so we do this one first. And then you turn the first officer's flight director switch on, and you can see the master light does not illuminate there. If you accidentally do it wrong, you can just switch the master by recycling the current master side, so turn that off. Then you can see it switches to the FO side and stays there, but today we want to fly from the left seat, so we ensure that the master is on this side. Next we're going to set up the MCP itself, and we are going to set this according to the departure that we are flying. So looking at our departure chart, we can see that the initial climb is all based on ANAV, but we've got this 279 inbound to Nürnberg that we could back up over here. So let's select 297 on the course, and later we are going to tune the associated VOR as well. We will get to that in a few moments though. So let's for now continue with the MCP itself. So we have set that course as needed. We ensure that the auto throttle switch is off. The speed is down to 100. The heading is going to be set to the runway heading, and the easiest way to get this is just by looking into the FMC, legs page number 1. The first track over there usually is your runway heading, so it's 134. So let's go ahead and select this. The angle of bank selector is set to 25 degrees, which is the second to last position there, and the altitude is going to be set to our expected initial altitude plus 100 feet. So the initial altitude, usually published on the chart, as we can see, initial climb clearance is 5,000. So let's go ahead and select 5,000, and then we add 100 feet to that. The reason we do this is to indicate to ourselves that this altitude has not been cleared yet by air traffic control. So this is just what we expect. but not actually cleared by ATC yet. Once the ATC clearance is obtained, we would reset this to the actual correct altitude. Next, we ensure that the autopilot disengage bar is up, and we set course 2 to something that would be reasonable, so that could, for example, since we've already backed up the inbound to Nürnberg, we could set the runway track down there, so that in case we need to do an immediate return, we would have that one available already. Likewise, we ensure that the right EFIS control panel is set up. From there, we're moving down to the main panel, and starting on the side, the nose wheel steering switch is in the guarded position, the main panel and lower DU switches are in the normal position. We test the autopilot and auto throttle and FMC warning lights down here, both the upper and the lower position. Then we move up to the engine controls. Over here we got the N1 selector in auto, the speed reference selector in auto. We turn the autobrake to RTO and observe the disarm light go on and then go out. That is the automatic test of the autobrake system taking place there. From there we move down to the fuel flow, which we reset and verify that the fuel used actually turns to 0 over there. If you don't have the fuel used indicator on the upper display unit, open the engine display and you definitely got it down here on the lower display unit. So, from there we also test the indicators on the first officer's side. The display select switches are in the normal position, and then we can move down to the standby instruments. Over here we ensure that the correct QNH is set, which is 1016 by now, and then moving down to the RMI we select VORs or NDBs as appropriate. Today that's going to be VORs on both sides. Then moving down to the control stand, the speed brake is in the retracted position, the flaps agree with the actual flap setting, which normally is going to be the up position, thrust levers in idle. Trim should normally be set to 4 units, but if it's not, then don't touch it. Just keep it where it is. We are going to set this later on. We ensure that the fuel levers are set into the cutoff position. The parking brake is set unless the brakes need cooling, then you can leave it released for the time. The stabilizer trim cutout switches are in the normal position, which means that the black guard down here is actually in place. And then we move down to the fire switches, where we ensure that the overheat detection loops are set into the middle position, the normal position. The fire switches are pushed in, so, well, not pulled out. That's literally the easiest way to see this. Then we move down to the pedestal. Over here we are going to start by setting up our radios. So normally you would start by setting the delivery frequency, which you could get from your charts, and then the ground frequency. If you're flying online and there is no ATC, then we would set something like Honeycomb 122.8, turn that active. From there we're moving down to the navigation radios. There are 2 types of radios available in the PMDG aircraft, either the multi-mode receiver, which we've got fitted to this airplane, which is the more modern equipment, or the conventional radios. In any case, we are simply going to tune whatever is reasonable. So we said earlier while setting up our MCP that we want the inbound course to Nürnberg over here. So let's go in here, we got Nürnberg 116.2, so we are going to tune 116.2, and we are going to switch that one active. Note that you do need to have selected the correct mode down here, otherwise the frequency cannot be selected. So if you try to select, for example, a VOR frequency while trying to set up the ILS, you're only going to get an error. Let me show you that. So 112.3, PMDG built in a little 8 over here, which switches it automatically to the VOR mode. In the real world, it would simply give you an error when you try to switch that active. So now we got ILS 1123. You can see that gives you an error because that is a VOR frequency, not an ILS frequency. So you can simply clear that and then select, for example, VOR 112.3, and you can see that that can easily be switched. So that's how you can do this in the Boeing 737. Now, it would of course be an idea to select the ILS frequency of the runway that you might return to, so 112.3 is prepared, well, 110.3 is prepared down here, in case we need to do an immediate return. Moving down to the audio control panel, we ensure that the transmitter is selected to VHF 1, we also listen to VHF 1 and to VHF 2. We'll also want to listen to the flight interphone, which is the one that's used when the two pilots are communicating through the headset, and also if the ground crew has plugged a headset in at the nose of the airplane. And finally, we do want that stuff on the speaker so that it's actually audible in the flight deck if you're not wearing the headset. Moving down, we can set our ADF as required and ensure that the tone is switched off. Cell call, we would reset if any of those lights was illuminated. None is illuminated now, so we don't need to reset it. Moving down then into the middle, the fire detection loops for the cargo compartment are set to normal. We ensure that weather and turbulence is selected on the weather radar and that it is in auto mode, which means auto button down. Like this would be manual, this is auto. Then moving down to the transponder, we ensure that it is selected to standby and squawk 2000. And we ensure that the transponder and altitude source switches are set to the side of the pilot flying. So if we are flying from the captain's side, we ensure number 1 is selected. If you are flying from the first officer's seat, you would select number 2. Since we are captain today, let's select number 1. Then we test the trim switches. So the way you do this is you select the side, then you observe it moving. You select the other side, you observe that it is moving into the other side, and then you just go back into the neutral position. The same is also done on the aileron, and the aileron trim scale is shown right on here on the top of the yoke. So as you can see, this is in the neutral position now, so let's move this to one side. You can see now the yoke is slightly deflected to the side, so now we got half a unit of trim to the left. Then we move it to the other hand side. Click and hold it for a bit. As you can see, now it's deflected to the right, and now we are moving this back into the standard neutral position. You can simply assign a button to the neutral position to make it easier, or you can zoom out a little bit to see where exactly the neutral position is, like this. Finally, we're moving over to the right hand side. The second radio is normally set to 121.5, which is the international emergency frequency, and since our airplane is data link equipped, you could set any company frequency on here. The second radio would be set up according to whatever is useful, so 112.3 for our VORs, that's Cologne VOR, and then 110.3 for the ILS in case of an immediate return. The first officer also wants to transmit on VHF 1 and listen to VHF 1 and 2, the flight interphone and the speaker as well, and radio number 3 is set to the data frequency. This is rather important because when this is not set to data and your aircraft is not fitted with a satellite communication system, then your entire data link system is not going to work. Finally, we ensure that the step trim switch is in the guarded normal position and the flight deck door selector is inoperative in PMDG aircraft for security reasons, and therefore that is our entire flight deck preparation, respectively pre-flight procedure, completed. Well, my friends, that's everything I got for now. Thank you very much for watching. As always, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. And if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you very much, and I'm seeing you all again on the next one.